just saying I'm not doing the intro. We're just going live. So everybody say hello to the internet. Ladies and gentlemen, variations thereof, welcome to the Selectives Lorecast, a casual Elder Scrolls podcast. We didn't bother doing an intro today because, screw it, we're casual. My name is Rotten Deadite. With me today are...
Hey everybody, I'm Michael. You might know me as Scourgicus or Moon Sugar Leader. And no, Keanu Reeves. The Khajiit are not the children of the Dwemer.
Aww.
It was a meme.
Yeah.
I'm Trainwiz. I make train mods and exclusively nothing else, according to the internet at least.
And I am Andrew, also known as the White Guar, who really likes slowed.
Mm-hmm.
I guess.
So at long last, we've finally gotten around to doing the a podcast about Dwemer lore, which is I mean, I kind of want to go out on a limb here and say that I don't think we've seen or read as much about the Dwemer as we have pretty much any other race on Nirn. Especially now that ESO is out and has explored what are traditionally underexplored cultures. And one might say that the mysteriousness of the Dwemer is due to the fact that they ain't around anymore. But I think you're selling it. I think that would be selling it short. I think a big reason is that the Dwemer were intentionally mysterious, and the reason for that, and this is kind of where I want to start the discussion, is that the Dwemer were incredibly unhappy with everything. They were, and I think Trainwiz will back me up on this, probably the grumpiest bunch of bastards you'll ever meet in your life.
I would agree completely. It seems like every single thing that the Dwemer did was either fueled by spite, rage, disappointment, or just generally upset with things that you normally be upset with.
Yeah. They were, they found a way to be mad all the time. Yeah.
I do disagree that the dwarves were particularly mysterious. There's a lot of insights into their culture we know about now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Slowed are arguably more mysterious at this point.
Well, true, but I would say that's because they're underexplored.
Basic aspects to the dwarves we don't really know about, but we've had a full conversation with several dwarves at this point.
Oh yeah.
ESO has given us some insight into some of their culture with contraband items and such.
Mm-hmm.
And Skyrim, of course, Blackreach was also a big eye opener there.
Yes.
And then Forgotten Seasons, my upcoming thing, got a show for that. There's a little bit more insight to some of their viewpoints there.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I didn't want to let you go today without sort of picking your brains about what Forgotten Seasons brings us for. Okay, so catching everybody up, Forgotten Seasons is the new mod that Trainwiz is just, is it released yet on the Creation Club?
It's going to be releasing pretty soon, probably. I don't control the Todd that controls time, so I don't know when it's going to be released.
All right, so depending on when the Todd decides to release it, then...
Time Todd.
Yeah, but soon, TM, can you give us a sort of a brief overview of the plot?
I'm not sure I can without spoilering anything that might violate some sort of contract that I've vaguely signed. Mm-hmm. But as you know, it's a Dwarven-themed dungeon themed around the 4 seasons. So each different season has its own puzzle related to that. Mm-hmm. So I think I can share this. The dwarves obviously didn't have a traditional view of the seasons. They lived underground, and they might have had their own seasonal system that doesn't match up to ours at all.
Makes sense.
This was in some ways sort of them looking at our seasons, the traditional season, fall, summer, spring, winter, and how they actually viewed those through their lens. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of this warped seasons gone wrong theme.
Okay. And just out of personal, because I'm probably going to end up casting it, about how many hours of gameplay do you figure?
I am not a good estimator of time. It's big. It's definitely one of the biggest dungeons out there. My immediate comparison would be the Mehrunes Razor dungeon for Oblivion, but probably a little bit bigger.
Yeah, big.
And there's a lot of side content to it. Like I said, there's you can get your own dwarven horse. There's a lot of new artifacts you can track down. Yeah, so ESO lore finally comes to Skyrim.
Yeah,
Everyone
that's
feel
right.
free to rage about that.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah. There's gonna need to be more of that. Yeah, I think we can all agree. So and I'm glad we got that out of the way at the beginning when most people are gonna still be watching this. Because I'm really I'm always really like I'm gonna fangirl a little bit. I'm always really excited when your mods come out. So I've been looking forward to another one for a while. It felt a little bit quiet.
I've been working on other stuff, as you know.
It's not like you're not busy. Yeah. Time is a flat circle, Johnny. What is that, Nietzsche? Shut the fuck up. So
Rust Cole from True Detective.
yeah, which everybody needs to watch the first season of and not the second.
That first season's incredible.
Yeah, it's really freaking good. It's actually very Elder Scrollsy if you're paying attention. And as usual, we're just running right off the rails. So
Excuse me, train funds are my thing.
yeah, right.
Not that bad.
So I think what probably at the root of Dwemer culture is their dissatisfaction of reality. So I think in a broad sense we should probably explore why they were so dreadfully dissatisfied with everything that was going on. And I want to hear from other people before I start ranting, which I think probably everybody else feels that way too. But
so my thought has I've always compared the Dwemer to like hardcore nihilist Buddhists, and
okay.
not necessarily in that they think nothing matters. It's that nothing exists, and they're trying to transcend the Kalpic cycle, which is awfully Buddhist.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to transcend the cycle of life and death and rebirth. And so because they have this understanding that this reality isn't real, so what's the point? Why are we here? We're stuck here. We want to get out where we can be actually free.
Did they want to get out, or did they want to not exist?
I think both. One is connected to the other.
Okay.
Because by ceasing to exist, they have removed themselves or are removed from this terrible existence that doesn't matter because it's not real. And on top of that, if we look at Numidium and what Numidium was supposed to do and what it can do, I think it becomes pretty clear that they wanted to free everybody else from that too. And they wanted the dream to be gone, because you are a prisoner. We are freeing you, not capital P prisoner, but just prisoner.
Yeah,
we're freeing you from this horrible existence. You don't know that you're trapped, so we're going to liberate you. And backfired horribly upon activating.
I feel like that gives too much philanthropism to the dwarves. I think that's too nice of them.
Sure.
The other part is, I think one of the key parts about Numidium is that it's actually it's a botched experiment. They did not bond to it properly. Kagrenak hit the wrong damn button at the last second.
Right.
So I don't know if I don't think they want total non-existence. They obviously want to get rid of Nern because they don't like Nern.
Yeah.
But it seems like they and the Altmer and most of the old style elves, it seems like it's not so much non-existence so much as it's non-linearity, breaking the cycle as it is. I mean, a lot of Elder Scrolls stuff is kind of steeped in the in Hindu mythology and all the more of the those kinds of philosophies. And so the whole escaping the cycle of rebirth thing, in those philosophies, it really isn't about non-existence. It's more about enlightenment.
Right.
So they're spiteful and they're mean, but ultimately their goal, I don't think, is non-existence. They don't want to cease to exist. They're not that hardcore nihilist, but they are hardcore enough to where they want everything else that they see as wrong to cease to exist. They want everyone who believes that to also cease to exist.
Right. And they want to correct an error that they feel they can correct.
Yeah.
sort of.
In a lot of ways, we've kind of seen that correcting an error seems to be a very Inuic trait, even if it manifests in different ways. Sophisil wants to take a hammer and fix the godhead.
Right.
The dwarves just want to blow everything up because they're evil.
And the Altmer just want to fix one part of it.
Yeah. My take on it is as I look at all of the Dwemer lore, and especially all the stuff dealing with Numidium, is that I see two major possibilities. There are definitely more, but there are two. One is that they're like, nope, erase everything. We're done. This is ridiculous. Make it stop. The other one is that, and I draw that pathos to that they know that this isn't real, or that they're either that they don't know it's real, or that they're in some way severely dissatisfied with the universe as it is. And so either they don't think it's real and they want to end the whole thing, wake up, dreamer, or they want to forget. And I think Numidium is
Getting some mic feedback.
Yeah, Jonathan, you might need to mute yourself again. Okay.
And anyway, I think Numidium is an attempt either to erase their memory of what they know about the universe, or to just destroy the whole bloody thing. I'm not sure which one, but those are the two that I see.
Yeah. And that's the
Am I better now?
Might be.
Much better.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a heretical thought. What if Numidium worked correctly?
That's something I wanted to explore too. I actually wanted to ask, since Michael and Trainwiz have both been much more attentive than in ESO's content than I have, which is not hard to do. I was actually going to ask, what have you guys been seeing in ESO that leads you to believe that Numidium was a botched experiment, as you put it?
Well, I'm trying to think. In ESO, we do have some examples of sort of dwarven soul uploading.
Okay.
I mean, there's one of the quests I always cite is there's the one where the eyelid princess, I forget her name, but remember she was in love with the dwarven engineer,
yes.
And he put her soul into a machine. So there's obviously a process there that works correctly. But I think on the subject of what if Numidium worked correctly, I am under the impression that it couldn't, because in that particular instance, we see almost all the instances of them kind of bonding with machines. It doesn't go right. And actually, Clockwork City gives us the suggestion that unless you are really, really, really into that kind of thing, it's pretty much a torturous, horrible existence. So I feel like maybe Kagranak was just like, oh, I'm robot skin now, woohoo. But I think everyone else, even if they are all, kind of inherently assholes, I think that part of the reason Numidium goes wrong is there's just so many people uploaded into that damn thing that you can't have everyone united in opinions other than reality sucks.
Right.
I think the only way Numidium would have gone right is if there had been just one guy in control of it. So I think the better question is, what if only Kagranak was part of the Numidium?
Right. Ooh.
Well, to add a heretical thought to the heretical thought, I kind of touch on this in Aria, where, depending on your interpretation, I kind of infer that Numidium did work correctly. It's just that people kind of misunderstood what that would actually mean and result in. So it was kind of like a similar take on that, of how Numidium did work, but it didn't work in the way that they assumed it would, because they made, I guess you want to call it a miscalculation or an error of some kind.
Or they just rushed out buggy code and
Yeah, it was spaghetti code.
One guy working on it with no QA team. What do you expect?
You have to run a UAT pass. You have to do it.
Or did they make a category mistake rather than a coding mistake? Is my thought. One of the things that I realized today was when the Dwemer are thinking about one of the things you're thinking about when you think about Dwemer in terms of how they think about the gods, they're not saying that there are no gods, because that's the common phrase that gets trotted out. The Dwemer don't believe in gods.
They're atheists. No.
Yeah.
No.
They don't. They believe that they and the gods are fundamentally the same stuff. They believe that them and the gods are fundamentally the same stuff. Is the effort they're making,
Right.
and in that sense, are they when you're thinking about, well, they're computing themselves to be something else? Did they say that when they're retranslating themselves up, did they retranslate themselves into something that's unintelligible to them? Were they managing the wrong sort of category shift, so to speak?
Mm-hmm.
I'm possibly garbling that a bit, but and even when you think about if they already knew what the skin of the Numidium was, I think it was Laura Lather did that fantastic piece on thinking about what skin is. Skin as an interface medium and that sort of thing. Even if that's how they were thinking about how they were going to function, they may well have said, well, we're expecting skin to be X when in fact it's Y. They didn't quite understand what they were turning themselves into, even if they pulled it off.
Well, I do approach the skin angle from a more of a Kirkbride angle, which is that skin is often not always, but often a reflection of culture.
Yeah, where your skin is ideology or something.
Right. So when they became the quote-unquote skin of Numidium, I think it's possible to interpret that as saying that they became the ideology of Numidium. So Numidium was kind of like a giant walking statement consisting of two letters.
It's very definitely a statement. I mean, we can look at Kulakhan for that. Dagothir says its entire point is to be a giant middle finger to the Empire.
I don't think that's what he said, but yeah, I get that. Yeah.
He said it was some symbol for my people to rally around.
Right.
Yeah.
So did they become the ideology of Numidium, whereas they were expecting Numidium to become their ideology? Did it get reversed in their expectation?
I think part of the trick with Numidium, and you guys know that I have a soft spot for Numi. The two things is what was
Numi-chan.
Oh God.
I'm all about lost causes. But that one, what was Kagerdak really trying to accomplish? But the other one is that the tribunal completely screwed Numidium up. And if you look at Sermon 36, there is like all kinds of horrible things that they do to Numidium. And whatever its original purpose was, I'm pretty sure that it was completely and utterly changed after they did what they did.
Yeah.
Maybe that was intentional. Truth in Sequence, Sotha still pretty much rants constantly about how bad Numidium was and how it's basically the ultimate bad guy. So maybe that was intentionally trying to steer it away from a more destructive purpose.
I mean, yeah, but then again, if we look at Sothasil's whole obsession with memory, then it would make sense that he would view Numidium as the ultimate bad guy that just wipes everything, including all memory of it, like Ancestral Scythe, right? So of course Sothasil, for personal reasons, is going to look at the Numidium as the big bad, whether it actually is or not.
Well, I think that Truth in Sequence was written from a. I'm gonna get gamey-wamey on you. I'm sorry, I can't help it. I think that the author who wrote Truth in Sequence was coming from a perspective of sort of confirming without confirming the events of Coda.
That's basically the intention, yeah.
Yeah, so pitching Numidium as the great big bad made a lot of sense in that respect. I'm not suggesting that, well, I am suggesting that may have been sort of part of the meta game purpose of Truth in Sequence was to solidify the events of Coda without outright, canonizing it, however you would do that for an event that happens in the future in these games.
Sermon 37.
Right?
But obviously those were written at the same time, so basically the same intention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Obviously, it's a drag.
So I think I think we can go a lot. I think we can all agree that there are a lot of different ways to. I mean, this is sort of me trying to wrap up this idea, this thread. That there are a lot of different ways to interpret the purpose of Numidium, whether it was a success or not. I think most people can agree that the. Well, I think we can definitely state that not all Dwemer were always on board with what the entire culture was doing. And the easiest way to say, and all I have to do is point at Hammerfell to prove my point. when Clan Orokin, not Orokin, Lorkhan. I'm sorry. I play a lot of Warframe. Clan Lorkhan. Yeah, when Clan Lorkhan split from the rest of the Dwemer and fucked off to Hammerfell. Hashtag not all Dwemer. Thank you, Johnny. That pretty much proves the point that not every Dwemer could have been 100% behind whatever Numidium was for. It definitely suggests it as a possibility. Clan Lorkhan's split might have been more along the lines of, we're never going to achieve apotheosis through destruction if we join with this ridiculous Resdania concept. But certainly it means that it does. And also, I should mention that I believe ESO has outright stated that the Dwemer had a form of telepathy.
I was actually going to get into that.
That's technology, not telepathy. You have guys walking around wearing pylons on their heads. In effect, it said that they look like miters, which is a whole other beef that I have with it. But the calling is explicitly a technological thing as far as ESO is concerned. It's not.
I don't know if it's
innate
explicitly
telepathy.
a technological thing, because the way it seems to suggest is that those helmets there were people who were basically like telephone operators.
Right.
But it says that those were mostly meant to enhance the calling rather than actually grant it, because the way it seems to suggest is that those guys were sort of like the main pylons, literally, like they were the main network node that other long distance callers, as it were, would connect to.
Which, of course, suggests that means that all Dwemer are basically networking of some kind. So you had switching Dwemer and, gateway Dwemer and
there's a bunch of different
Dwemer
helmets. So there's obviously different roles. So I do think the calling was actual. So it was telepathy of a sort, but I don't think it was technologically granted. I think it was technologically assisted.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going to go with that thought. Yeah.
Can you just imagine for a second if Dwemer called the wrong people?
Say again?
Like, imagine if the Dwemer called the wrong people. So, like, there's an angry Dwemer mother. It's like, if you're not back home in 20 minutes, it's like, ma'am, I am old. Like,
some Argonian on the other end of the line going, hello?
Like a large with extra cheese.
Yeah.
I now need.
Can we get a pound of Cliff Racer wings, please?
Yeah, right.
I need a meme of Vivec being called by a Dwemer mom.
Could you tell Ukthun Saz to come home, please? He's needed for his no sleep. Ma'am, you have the wrong number.
Just to pick up on that.
No, they have robocallers.
Oh.
He picks up the phone and it's like some guy trying to order like 50 gears from him or something.
Mm-hmm. He just keeps hitting the numbers. Beep. God damn it.
We're with the Steam Duct Cleaning Service. We hear you have.
Are you having problems with your ducts?
That's
Central Services.
Okay.
James, you had a thought.
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking on the whole notion of that if they are connected innately and they all form different functions, that kind of predisposes them to the kind of uniformity that most people don't. That kind of goes against what Clan Lorkhan were doing. Is that the idea that the Dwemer were either predisposed to or were at least striving towards, as a culture, some sort of uniformity of thought and being. If they were kind of predisposed to be different organs within a body and form different functions within the society in that sort of a way, were they consciously trying to do that, or were they in some way predisposed to that? If we think of it in terms of Vivec the person and Vivec the city, and the city doing something and the individual bits within the city doing something, it might be some sort of cultural imposition if they were trying to achieve something like something like Chim or Amaranth, which I don't think they were explicitly trying to do.
Oh,
But it feels like that sort of a feeling. As a race, if there are those that kind of function as connector nodes, then are they a race that functions as a single organism in some way?
right. Sermon 36 mentions. Sermon 36 suggests that Numidium was built in the image of Vivec, which I always assumed was politics. But was it? Are you suggesting maybe that it was built in the image of Vivec the city, not Vivec the god?
That's not a thought that I had, but it's a good one. I always took that to be that Vivec was tacitly admitting that he and the Numidium had the same source in the Heart of Lorkhan. That was how I always read that. If you're saying that, if you think about the way that people talk about Vivec the city and Vivec the person, and how that relates to Chim, in that there's an awful lot of city and state metaphors, and that if something within the city, within the state, is the same as the city doing it, can we extend those sorts of metaphors to the Dwemer race? Are they kind of built that way as a race, which also kind of predisposes them to go towards that sort of apotheosis anyway?
Well, they're definitely not a hive mind. The calling seems to imply that it is something they can turn on and off. And would also have defeated Numidium in the first place. And
so that they can survive without the calling, because I mean, what's his name's doing fine. Spider Fatso dude. What's his name? Help.
But I do think that if you have that sort of that power, that's going to predispose you to basically becoming all kind of very sane. Because you've got the psychic influence over you to some extent, which would explain a lot about the Dwemer as to why they're all spiteful little bastards, and why there doesn't seem to be much variation in that level of spite. Mind you, we have a pretty limited pool of examples to pull from.
True.
Namely a tonal architect and a Radak in Tribunal. Was he a military blacksmith? Because I think he said he was like a soldier or something. So basically, two people who were very
I don't
much.
remember.
Yeah. He was a military guy.
Isn't there a
Dwemer in Vollenfell or one of the dungeons? There's a Dwemer that you meet in ESO.
No, you might be confusing him with, in Orsinium, there's like an elf trying to go all robot on people, the harmonic auditor. But I'm pretty sure he's not actually a dwarf. He has no beard for one thing, so you know he's not.
Oh wait, we're talking about the guy in the chair?
Yeah, the guy in the chair.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think he was a Dwemer either. Something didn't feel right. Yeah.
Oh, I thought he was a Dwemer.
I honestly thought, if I had to make a theory, I thought he was a kicked out apostle.
Yeah.
Because the naming scheme is much more similar to how Sothosil names his stuff.
Yeah,
and
true.
That whole quest line actually it keeps mentioning the Clockwork City.
And I mean, the most damning evidence to me is that he didn't have a beard, and exactly. Symbolically, beards are really a big deal in Elder Scrolls. So I don't know if they are in ESO though. But
I mean, one of the main items you can get is a giant beard, so obviously.
Right. I
wanted to take a minute to examine something you said, Chris. You mentioned how Numidium is built in the shape of Vivec, and you suggested it might be the city that it's referring to rather than Vivec himself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm looking at a map of Vivec from Morrowind, and I mean, if you look at it,
if you squint, kind of looks like a human.
It kind of has a humanoid shape. With
the
fourth quarter being the head, and the paddle being the feet. We know what feet means. But I mean, by the time Numidium was built, I mean this is first era, and Vivec the city wasn't built. We see it still So I don't know. I mean, maybe time shenanigans. I don't really know. We are talking about Dwemer after all.
Well, yeah. First off, as Slovakian is pointing out, this is heresy, and I would like you to report to the Ministry of Truth as soon as possible. The other thing I would like to mention is that there's absolutely no record of the timeline when the 36 lessons were written, except that we can pick them up in ESO.
Yeah, so they're obviously post.
Yes and no.
Second era, or is it?
Right, because
was it 538 or something?
Well, theoretically, the thing is that something that I've been trying to suggest, and ESO doesn't exactly throw this away, is the idea that the 36 lessons of Vivec don't show up for people who aren't supposed to get them. So they show up in Morrowind because you're the Nerevarine, and they show up in ESO because you are working for Vivec. But they don't show up in Skyrim or Oblivion because the character doesn't need them.
They do show up in Skyrim, I believe, actually. 36 lessons.
Oh, do they show up in the expansion?
I think so. I'm trying to look at it.
They might.
I keep getting Elder Scrolls Wiki instead of UESP.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I've never seen
They
it.
don't show up, huh? They don't show up in Skyrim. I swore they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't recall ever seeing him.
So anyway, maybe that's too headcanon, but it's an idea that I had that explains a number of things. They show up in Skyrim base game? I don't think they do. And so, and at any rate, if the there's a lot of timey-wimey that goes on in the 36 lessons anyway. The easiest one to point out is that the Treasure Wood sword is supposed to represent the martial arts required to set straight lines into curves, which is needed for Vivec to defeat Moon Axle. But Vivec gets the Treasure Wood sword after he defeats Moon Axle. So how does Vivec need the Treasure Wood sword to defeat Moon Axle if he's already done it? You see where I'm going with that?
Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I always took the Treasurewood sword to be the Morag Tong, but
Yeah, it's MK mentions in an AMA that it represents a forgotten martial art, basically.
okay.
Which is dreadfully complicated, but there it is. Doesn't make my life any easier. I'll tell you that for free. Why is Sermon 20 taking so long, Nelson? Well,
Well,
Because it's Sermon 20.
because it's non-linear AF. That's why. So, okay. So
You said early on that you had your own thoughts about the Dwemer, which I think related to Jung, because of course we're going to talk about Jung.
oh,
But maybe that's
yeah.
what you were gonna
Take a
talk
shot,
about?
everybody, by the way. For the Selectives Lorecast drinking game, they mentioned Jung.
That's right.
yeah.
Well, yeah, I was going to mention that Carl Jung has a concept called psychic death, which is which he calls psychic death, which is the idea of the only true danger that a person can actually find when doing the sort of Gnostic spiritual procedures that he recommends in the Red Book. And psychic death is it's basically a point at which a practitioner can reach where they decide that they have figured out everything, that they've done all their research and they've done all the right meditation, and they've solved basically all the problems that they're ever going to have, and that they've figured it out. It's all, it's all laid out in front of them, and it's all downhill from here. We've got it. Let's go. Jung says that this is extremely dangerous because the whole point of reaching the enlightenment state that he's trying to drive people towards, whatever you want to call it, the ego self-access or whatever, is the spiritual rebirth, this unification of man and God, is that you can't understand, by its very nature, you cannot understand God. And when you, if you reach a point in your practice that you become completely like that you think you've mastered everything, that's when you've potentially reached a point where you cannot turn back. Your ego and your soul, it's very hard for you to become convinced once you've reached this point of psychic death that you have that you actually don't understand what you're doing, because unfortunately people who reach that point start reinforcing their beliefs, that their belief of correctness, with all the things that they're seeing. It all becomes evidence that they're right, like some kind of lunatic putting together, like, numbers on the wall, or the time of day added up in a certain way means that I rule the world or something, and
it's beyond confirmation bias to like a beautiful mind type stuff, right?
Exactly right. Yeah. And Beautiful Mind's a very good example. It is a type of insanity because, and this runs you directly off the rails that you of the direct. Thank you, Trainwiz. Of the direction that you're supposed to be going in. So it's and what I like to think is that the intrinsic flaw in that the Dwemer had in their culture and their philosophy was that they thought they had it all figured out. And yeah, and that's.
I mean, isn't that kind of a reoccurring theme with people who are Anuic?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, if you approach Elder Scrolls lore from a Patamaic point of view, which is easy to do considering all the writing that's been done by Kirkbride and so on that are intrinsically from a Patamaic standpoint, it's very easy to think about the universe from a perspective of chaos is necessary and good and functional and part of the grand improvement process, etc., Vivec's golden path, as we've discussed in the past. And I try not to encourage that, honestly, even though I do it myself all the time, because one of the advantages of Elder Scrolls lore is that there is no right answer and that everything is up to interpretation. And so highly Anuic structures, like philosophical structures like what you get in Truth and Sequence, are supposed to be treated as valid as highly Patamaic structures. But I think if anything, things like the grand, like, the whole point that the Thalmor have and the grand man versus mare war are all started because people think they have it figured out. The ability to admit that you're wrong is fundamentally something that binds everybody together. It's very hard to meet peacefully on something if you're not willing to bend a little. But that's my Patamaic point of view, once again, my bias comes out.
The Dwemer almost go beyond that, though. They don't say that we're right. It's that they say you're wrong, but it doesn't matter. It's to the point of it's the idea of existence in itself doesn't matter, regardless of the actual answer. It from the perspective that we get on that, it almost feels like they think that if things, it almost feels like they confuse things that do exist and things that should exist. There are various comments that MK's made, I'm sure, about posse points and imposse points, and that none is not a fundamental contradiction, but something like that. It's an impossible place. The Dwemer seem to acknowledge that and kind of run with it. They say that, well, because it's impossible, it shouldn't exist. It doesn't exist. And they kind of conflate the two. I think they conflate the two. Because it's an impossible place, they go as to say it doesn't exist. Because reality is flexible, it probably doesn't exist. They're looking for an absolute truth in a new way.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking, they are looking for something that cannot be contradicted, that cannot have another facet to it, which is something that I think that they're looking for, and
a platonic truth of sorts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. I had the idea that was potentially why they were why Numidium destroys everything. That they were creating something that fundamentally exists and exists on its own, because if it does exist, then then it can't be something that can be perceived to be something else. Yeah. Otherwise, if you can possibly say that A is not A on some level, then not A. Then A doesn't exist at all.
It's sort of antimatter, kind of. Yeah.
So in order to achieve that, you need to obliterate any and all perception. You need to just be the only thing that exists. Otherwise, you could run the risk of something else saying that you are something else.
Well,
so you've got to smash all other opinion.
Is it possible then that Numidium was not created with the intention to do this? Is its functional behavior an unintended feature?
It's not a bug, it's a feature.
Yeah. Like, is it possible that what we see Numidium doing now is nothing like what it was supposed to do in the first place?
That would be my argument. Back when Sermon 37 dropped, I wrote a piece called "The Codex of the Divine and Numidium," which looks at Numidium as actually meant to do something good, but the tribunal completely screwed it up, and so instead of being whatever, however you want to define that, it became a force of obliteration.
Well, but that's what I mean. Is what is it about the Dwemer culture? If let's just say I'm right, which is a leap. But if
I'll take that leap.
If the Dwemer culture is what it is, what about the Dwemer culture that we know would possibly describe a situation that what could we suggest that the Dwemer actually wanted Numidium to do? Is it actually end reality or something else?
One of my heresies is that it was telling the dreamer to wake up. That part of their dissatisfaction was the realization that all of this is... Oh, what was the phrase Kirkbride used? Something about hypnagogic visions in the dream of an uncaring, or something like that.
I don't know, but I just went cross-eyed thinking about it. So
probably mixing a couple of them there, but there's all a dream.
Hypnagogic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's all a dream, and they're like, "Dreamer, you need to wake up and deal with your problems. This is not solving anything."
Well, I think
that might be too meta. That might be too meta for some people.
It might be, but I think we do remember that I think we can suggest that the Dwemer were very aware of the Godhead, judging from their manipulation of tonal architecture, which manipulates the synesthetic nature of the Godhead.
Yes.
Which is how rare is it to actually be aware of the Godhead, though?
Well, that's kind of a question I've always had. Like, how? I mean, just being aware that the Godhead exists, I think it's a safe thing to say that just being aware that the Godhead exists intellectually is not dangerous. Not like will cause a zero sum.
I mean, it's just basically saying Anu is the ultimate God. I mean, look at Sothasil. He's in no danger, and he talks all the time about that.
Yeah. You know, or even the dreamlike nature of the Arbus, knowing that it's a dream doesn't necessarily cause a zero sum. And it's possible, I think it's entirely possible to base an entire culture heavily on the awareness of unreality without fear of, self-annulment, because you're... I mean, just reaching a point of zero sum requires such an intense concentration. It's literally the exit just before Chim, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think kind of the safety valve there is the realization that sometimes the dream no longer requires the dreamer. So that even if, and this is a whole other subject, I know, but even if this is all a dream and nothing is real, there's nothing to say it can't become real.
Right. Or
it all depends on how you define real.
And I think it's also worth pointing out that there is also an argument to say that, and it's very not Platonic, but there is also an argument to say that if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck and it feels like a duck, then it's a duck.
Right.
Which it's not, I mean, barring all the talk of ducks, it's not really a philosophy I've seen much in Elder Scrolls, which is the idea of just saying, look, it doesn't matter if reality is real or not. It's impossible to perceive it otherwise, so it might as well be.
Yeah, this is what we have.
And the problem, and that's a great philosophy until Tiber Septim or Vivec shows up and goes, point of fact.
Right.
Yeah, but they do perceive it as something different, is the thing. They wouldn't be able to notice it otherwise. They must have on some level some realization that the waking world is the amnesia of dream. Otherwise,
shit.
they wouldn't be able to come out with it.
Well, I just had a thought. If Dwemer are psychic to some level, or telepathic to on some level, are they not in one way or another perceiving the an element of the state gradient of Echo Mundus? State gradient Echo Mundus Centrix?
They're part of the way there, certainly. They're more there than other people. Yeah.
Break that down for me, Chris. I mean, I'm with you, but break that down for us.
All right. So hang on. Another possibility is that since the Dwemer were basically in some form of communion with the Heart of Lorkhan by virtue of having various cities around it and deep underground and around Red Mountain, they were actually in their own way communing with Lorkhan, which would explain their view on things. Because Lorkhan was the first one who saw the true shape of the universe, how he looked past the wheel and saw the eye and realized, oh hey, wait a second.
Yeah.
And then Lorkhan went back to the Atada and said, hey, so bear with me here for some radical change shit. And they're like, wait, what? And we all kind of know the horrible history after that.
Yeah.
So if anything, it could also be that the heart, this powerful living artifact, was actually having some kind of perhaps even subconscious effect on them, because Lorkhan, one of the greatest agents of change, saw an opportunity to use the Dwemer in some way to create the Numidium that could therefore help bring about the I guess you could say the final evolution towards Amaranth that he couldn't achieve but knew that was possible for someone else.
Right.
And that's some real heresy right there.
Well, to bring back, actually something that I've never really gotten a satisfactory answer on, and maybe you ESO guys will be able to answer this for me. Is there any reason, I seem to recall somebody telling me at some point or another that the Dwemer were always following the Heart of Lorkhan. As in, Dwemer culture grew up, became a thing because of the presence of the Heart of Lorkhan.
I don't feel like that would be correct, because it seems to imply both in Morrowind and other places that they find the heart actually fairly far along into their culture. Everything is going swimmingly with Nerevar and Dumek, they're high-fiving and getting burgers and stuff. And then, Kagranak's out there down in his basement, chipping away at a wall, and the wall falls down, and suddenly, boom, there's the Heart of Lorkhan. He's like, oh shit, I'm going to make a robot out of that.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus,
that's a leap, but I can see it. A great big fuck off heart. I need to build a robot around this.
It kind of feels like what they do to the heart is kind of exploitative as well. Particularly if you think about what the Nerevarine does. If you take Vivec at her word, and about what happens to the heart when it gets struck with the tools, you are destroying the Dwemer enchantments around it. So you're destroying whatever chains got put on the heart, if I can use that language, but it gets called freed afterwards. So I don't think it's that much of a leap. It's a distortion of the heart, which we also find in the 5 songs. It says something about the quality of the heart being changed, or the something. Right at the end, I can't remember the precise wording, but those kind of imply to me that what the Dwemer were doing to the Heart of Lorkhan isn't in line with what the heart already was.
Right.
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actively trying to escape.
Well, to elaborate on that, well, okay, there's a couple things I sort of want to elaborate on and bring back to a less like super meta place. But to build off this point for a second is. Everything is basically music in the Elder Scrolls universe, right? It's all a song, and what is the first instrument ever known to man but the heartbeat, right? Like that's
the doom
very
drum.
first that keeps the beat. But you can manipulate a heartbeat. You can shock it. You can slow it down. You can speed it up, which has various effects on the rest of the body. In this case, the world. So tonal architecture, especially how the Dwemer were doing it, was basically manipulating the heartbeat of the world. So in that sense, yeah, you can absolutely change it, and that could radiate different changes because it will change the pace of the world or some variation thereof. To also go back to the whole point of the escape route, right? Because we've heard, I can't remember which writing, I don't know if it's like the report on the disappearance of the dwarves or something else, that mentions that the Dwemer saw Numidium as the escape route to escape this mortal prison, right?
Yeah.
And this is sort of where my own personal headcanon and heresy that I've talked about a bit in the past comes in, where, yeah, they thought they were dealing with Lorkhan, but they were actually dealing with the real missing god, which is Magnus, who leaves the biggest, most obvious escape route, which is the giant fucking hole in the sky that they call the sun. So that's kind of my own personal heresy. And I also want to bring it back to how even though there was this ideological shift, sorry, not a shift, a split between the Dwemer of Resdania and the Lorkhan clan, why then did the Lorkhan also disappear? If there was this sudden ideological split where they said, we're not working with those Chimer, like we're literally going to go to the other end of the continent to be as far away from them as possible.
Well, I think it's been suggested that all the Dwemer were brought into Numidium sometimes against their will. But it's also, I think it's probably a safe assumption to say that just because the Clan Lorkhan objected to Resdania did not mean they objected to the goal of Numidium.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, if you can be brought into Numidium against your will, there's kind of the implication that you can non-consensually call someone, as it were.
Yeah.
Because so that's one assumption, and of course the other assumption is the call goes out to everyone. It says we're going to be skid, and every single dwarf says, "Okay,
I'm up with that." Yeah, skin it is. Yeah.
Skin me up, bro.
Although I've got a kind of query to Felix's central point there. Yeah, I just kind of brushed past that. But just to your central point there, if manipulating the Heart of Lorkhan is manipulating the world in some way because you can muck around with the heart of the world and affect the rest of the body, why did they just build a toy robot? Aiming to build Numidium and do something with just your race feels kind of like a low bar if you've got the heart of the world at your beck and call and can manipulate the whole of the world. If they're already convinced it doesn't exist anyway, why did they not aim a little higher?
I think this is still kind of the same question as, like, the dwarves very clearly have massive robot armies with guns. Why didn't they rule the world? It's always been a matter of interest. I mean, if they think the world isn't real, why the hell would they try to change it? They don't have that viewpoint. It's not we want to fix the world. It's fuck the world. Who cares about it? It's I've got me in mind.
But do they? Do they have me in mind, so to speak? They are part of the world. Did they think that they were privileged to some level of reality that everything else in the world didn't have?
I would definitely describe them as privileged.
fair point. But
why
already
don't you ask the Falmer how that turned out?
Yeah, right?
yeah. Yeah, it's just if they think that the whole of reality doesn't exist, why bother saving themselves? Why not just pull the plug and be done?
I don't think they think the whole of reality doesn't exist. It's specifically the mortal plane and the Calpic cycle and linear time that they disagree on.
Gotcha.
That's the same
okay.
view as the Altmer. It's everything used to be chill and stuff. We were all immortal and things. And then Lorkhan came along and fucked it all up.
Yeah.
Everything changed when the first emo attacked.
Okay.
Oh boy.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting idea. I've kind of always thought of the Dwemer as being the deniers of the entirety of reality, but the idea that they just wanted to stop the Calpic cycle and stop stop convention and stop Lorkhan from doing what he inevitably does every time brings them more in line with a typical Marish point of view.
Yeah, very much.
I think a mistake people make with the dwarves is treating them as too incomprehensible. Well, I mean, Coda's entire point was that they weren't incomprehensible. They were just kind of whiny.
Mm-hmm.
Their viewpoints are actually pretty easy to understand, and they are in line with a lot of other races. It's just they're a lot more extreme about them, and their approach towards reality is a lot different.
Yeah.
They are incomprehensible in technology, if not in philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. Yeah.
Wow, making sense in Elder Scrolls.
I know, it doesn't happen. We don't often reach conclusions like this in this podcast.
This is true.
It usually means we're wrong. Yeah.
Well, here's a few other things that, to my knowledge, we haven't really talked about so far, which maybe we should since we're pushing on 3 o'clock now. Let's actually try and explore, like either through instances that have been written or recorded, or Dwemer airship plans that we've seen in Morrowind and other games, what Dwemer culture and cuisine might have been like, because we can see some echoes of it in I think it's the ghosts that you see in Morrowind. They still wear like the traditional garb, which has a very like Sumerian or Babylonian vibe to it.
Yeah, their culture seemed to be kind of that cradle of civilization thing. I mean, if we look at Redguard, there was a lot of Egyptian stuff there too as well. And I'm kind of sad that no longer seems to be the case.
I don't know, man. I still like my weird, Bushido, heartbreaking sword-powered, like Eldon Yokeda, violent, badass warrior dudes from essentially Black Atlantis. Like, I can dig it.
Yeah, I like the Redguard. I meant literally the Dwarven ruins in Redguard.
Yeah. Like it does seem like, but perhaps again that's sort of just unique to Stros Mackay. I don't play ESO, so I haven't seen if they've added the Dwemer ruins and how those are stylized, or if they're just like clones from Skyrim. I haven't had a chance to see it yet.
They're pretty similar to the ones in Skyrim, and I was actually rather frustrated when I got to Vardenfell and they had kind of the same look as the ones in Skyrim. I'm like, no, different plan, different plan. Come on.
Yeah,
but,
there is unique architecture in the Vardenfell Dwarven ruins, though.
Yeah.
At least for ESO, that is.
And do we know anything about, say, like Dwemer culture and society beyond what we've gotten, which is admittedly from a very biased standpoint, which is that of the Chimer?
So there's a lot of little things we know here and there. As far as we can tell, there is some level of their hierarchy.
Yeah.
No, obviously we had kind of the tonal architectures on top. As far as I can tell, there were some level of dwarven nobility. I'm trying to think. Let me try and search up ESO's contraband items, because those always There's definitely
mm-mm.
a level of nobility, but it doesn't seem to be. I think Dwarf King, Dumac Dwarf King,
Right.
as far as I can tell, his role was not something in terms of actual like a bloodline thing. So,
Oh, you thinking maybe they were elected?
I don't know if he was elected, but I can't exactly say if he was actually like if there is the House of Dumac, like
Oh,
they're not. There's obviously what we know for certain is that there were clans. There were definitely bloodlines and clans, and that they ruled via city-states, but still kind of answered to a high king, which was Dumac.
that's right. Yeah, they did have city-states. Yeah.
And they did fight it sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get some of that in Skyrim with the Ethereum side quest.
Mhm.
And they show like there was sort of this alliance between 3 cities. Like, okay, the forge is here; these shards are here to keep peace between the cities.
Mhm.
Yeah. The Chronicles of Left at their word. It looks like there's a kind of council structure type going on as well. Lords and councils and councillors meeting, discussing stuff.
I think counselor is a bit too civic of a term. It seems more like everyone was an engineer to some extent. Because remember, going back to the princess trapped in the robot, so her lover was an engineer. So obviously, and it doesn't seem there's no implication that that was actually like some sort of forbidden romance. Like if anything, it was actually kind of encouraged. So it seems like being an engineer was on par with being a, I guess you'd say, like maybe a lord or a duke or something. So if anything, if they had a structured society, it would be one that's sort of a technocracy.
Right.
There is it in Chronicles of Nicholeft? There is some discussion about leaders and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
It counselors and such. Although I have a feeling that's likely of what the actual terms are, given that that's written by an Altmer.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember what language it's written in, because I think it's in
hang on.
Altmeris.
Oh, yes, it's written in Altmeris.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a translation.
Yeah, there may be a translation error. Dun dun dun.
Yeah.
Dun dun dun.
Yeah, we've also got the titles of Protector as well, Protector in general, but which implies a separate military hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
So
and apparently they like pancakes.
Pancakes?
Say again, Trainwiz?
Yeah, I'm just looking through some of the dwarven stuff you can collect, and you can get a steel griddle, and apparently they used drills instead of tissue paper for clearing their noses. That seems kind of horrifying.
Okay.
I guess it depends on what's on the end of the bit. I mean,
okay. Am I the only one imagining now that like the dwarves, especially with their beards and everything, and all the brass? It just like over the years, their hair is so wiry and tinged with brass that they actually need like a drill or like a nose plier thing to like.
A lot of the stuff I'm finding seems to be
gradually their bodily fluids become more and more metallic. Yeah.
I think the headcanon, the fanon that everyone accepts that dwarven beards were a big thing in their society seems to be correct.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to mention, because of my love and appreciation for it, there is a fantastic fan story written a few years ago called The Epithalamium of Aramatha by Dinmanel / Vesperidian, and I believe that Tosak had a hand in it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fairly sizable. I'll have a link here, and it is magnificent, and the language is pretty deep and it's a little difficult to understand, but it's a powerful story that goes very, very dark. But it kind of deals with Dwemeri marriage practices and Dwemeri philosophy. And if you haven't read it, it is well worth the read.
Definitely gonna add that to the list.
Yeah, it's a yeah, those two are a huge freaking gold mine of Elder Scrolls lore. Yeah, I miss them desperately.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
They were It really helped me out early on when I was trying to figure out Dwemer lore.
Mm-hmm.
It's a shame they couldn't join us today. Their appearance would have been greatly appreciated.
Well, I think people move in and out of Elder Scrolls lore is how it works. But yeah, it was moving back to the idea of roles in Dwemer society. It was definitely a very regimented culture. But it didn't seem to run on. There didn't seem to be strata like lower class or upper class. I don't think. But there was definitely sort of like a like some people were doing jobs that were considered more culturally desirable. I mean, you had the equivalent of Dwemer lawyers, and then you had Dwemer doctors, and then you had Dwemer doctor lawyers, and and
calm down there, Brooklyn kid.
Yeah, but, and it was like, so I don't think there was like a but I don't think there was like a lower class, upper class, middle class kind of thing.
Not that I've seen.
Well, yeah, because it didn't exist because they had all these robot workers, right? They were the one, like the robotic workers were the ones doing the most menial of jobs. So every actual able-bodied Dwemer could do some kind of cultural or technological or like religious pursuit of some kind, right? Like,
yeah.
If you don't need actual workers to maintain the pipes and clean everything and do patrols because you have all these robots doing it, then you can kind of sit there and think, well, yeah, let us ruminate on the nature of existence. Or, oh, we need to actually design the new expansion for the city, so we need to do surveys in this. Or, oh, let's study the stars. Let's map this out and make these gears. How does this work? Like you can do a lot more of that. And so in that sense, it's a more egalitarian society because you have essentially a robot slave army that doesn't complain and will never rise up against you, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Another thing to in that matter of the dwarves didn't really have to care too much about infrastructure or the more menial stuff is that there's evidence that they had a lot of bullshit magic stuff that took care of a lot of basic necessities for them. There's things called dwarven ever pumps that just constantly produce water. There's energy supplies and stuff. The steam seems to be more of a side effect than an actual power source.
That's so typical of the kind of thing you find out about Dwemer is everybody's got this idea of them all being steam powered, and they're like later on you find ESO tells you, oh, the steam's entirely side effect. It doesn't really matter.
Everyone thinks the dwarves had trains, man.
Yeah,
they didn't.
Right. Mm-hmm.
If I might point something out, because we're talking about social strata here, remind me what Kagranak's title is.
Chief Tonal Architect?
Chief Tonal Architect. Chief Shop. It's Chief Shop Former, as in foreman.
Oh.
Yeah.
I remember reading him being referred to as like the Craft Lord.
Yeah, so I could tell more on that, but I think I'd be violating some sort of NDA.
Okay.
Ooh, spicy.
Once again, folks, it's called Forgotten Seasons. It's available on the Creation Club soon.
It has nothing to do with Forgotten Seasons, but the Dwarven language, I think I can say this because it seems like people have figured it out. There is a Dwarven language, and if people can figure out the some of the words on them, that might give them more insight as to Kagranak and some other, maybe his relationship with Dumak.
Mm-hmm. Is it? Should we be looking in ESO? Because I have to tell you that the stuff we get in Morrowind is damn near indecipherable.
I think ESO will say here is this dwarven place, and then they'll give the translation of the name. Like I said, I've seen a few guides, and they've been pretty accurate in the translation of the dwarven language.
Is it consistent with the translations that we have from Skyrim, from the big Falmer related
Falmer's tablet?
Yeah, wasn't that Falmer?
If that has like actual words and stuff, then if they say Nichuan Zel means such and such,
yeah,
or the word dorp means this, then that would probably be a good place to start.
Okay.
Dorp, I like that.
Yeah,
that's my dorp.
I don't remember if it did or not. It's been a while since I know that somebody spent a lot of time translating that into plain ass English, and I don't remember how far they got. But I think they did move. I'm almost positive they made some progress. Yeah.
Let me look at that.
I'll have to dig around and find something. That's very interesting.
Tonal architects were definitely on the same level as royalty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, although I think Morrowind, if I'm right, had precise actual intelligible Dwemer language out of it because they decided that Baladas Denavani, the Dwemer language is unknown, perhaps unknowable.
Oh yeah,
so
okay.
At that point,
we do have some Dwarven language translations here.
Where? What are you looking at?
Just look on the USB Dwemer language.
Okay. All right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So Akka was king. So Ak was king. So we
it
have
would be king. Yeah.
So Dumak is something king, and then we have there Kagra is tones. So we have Kagranak as in
king of tones, right? Mm-hmm.
So the question is, was that his actual name, or was that his title?
Or is it the same thing?
Right.
So was he born into a role?
Or assumes that role on maturity, one of the two.
Or assume the name after assuming the role. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of like renaming a pope. You know?
I mean, look at this. Doom seems to be we, us, dwarf. So Doom refers to dwarf, or us, people. So Dumak is dwarf king.
Right.
So Dumak Dwarf King's name is
Dwarf King. Yeah.
That's some Tolkien shit right there.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, actually, that's just typical of humanity. I mean,
it's the Department of Redundancy Department. Yeah.
Yeah, like Lake Titicaca just means lake. Sahara is desert, so the Sahara Desert is the desert.
Yeah.
ATM machine.
Chai is just the Indian word for tea, so chai tea is tea. Like, we humans are very bad at this.
Crap! Now I really want to. I'm really hoping that we see some people in the fandom do some really serious hard dives into Dwarven language, because I've been trying to figure out what the fuck Nchulmaz means for a very long time. So.
For all we know, it's like
someone's
a
got
version
to
of
have gone
Dwarven
through
burritos or something.
It translates literally to that place with the thing where that guy did the stuff. Yeah.
There's got to be a linguist out in the community somewhere. I mean, there has to be.
Well, if there is, maybe it's possible nobody's noticed it yet. So, what else do you guys want to talk about? We've kind of hit the big points.
I mean, my go-to is always Radak, because he's, other than Yagram, people say Yagram is like a good insight into Dwarven culture, but the thing is, he's a bloated fat guy in a spider chair, and I don't think he actually remembers too much. Because Sothasil's last words, which at this point I'm pretty much going to assume is canon. I mean, too much stuff in like ESO and other places pulled from it to not be. It says that he was actually slowly getting his memory back. So I won't say he's biased, but he doesn't have the full picture. Versus Radak seems to be, even though he's dead, he seems to be quite coherent, and he seems to give a lot of insight just as to how the general dwarf live their life.
Yeah. I'm being told to talk about the Dwemer children's rhyme.
There's also the fact that there's a Dwemer machine that controls the weather under the city of Mormold.
Oh, there's more. What makes you think there's just one?
Okay, that's an I should have specified. Like, we know of at least one, but yes, there's probably like others elsewhere.
Yeah. There's another good machine in ESO. When we go to Nissus, there's a plot line there is that there's a big pipe organ that can reprogram you so that you are physically addicted to work.
Huh.
Yeah, it's so they actually did slave labor in Dwarven society apparently was they would tonal architecturize you so that you would be so addicted to work you'd actually pay the dwarves to give you jobs.
God, the Dwemer are terrifying assholes.
They're horrible.
I know,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah,
they make the Altmer look kind and compassionate by extension.
I almost wonder if the Dwemer think they're doing a good thing, because it was like an hour ago.
If there was any view on that, I think it would be that, hey, we're enslaving you anyways. We might as well program it so that you enjoy it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of more horrifying in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we think about what I said like an hour ago about how they wanted to use Numidium to free everybody. We're going to free the shit out of you whether you like it or not.
It's America.
They may think that it's a philanthropy kind of philanthropist kind of stance, but really it's not. They may just not have those social graces where they like consent maybe isn't a thing for them, and so they don't know the difference, and so they're going to make you do things, but they think they're doing them. Everyone wants to work. Well, we're just going to make you enjoy it so you can come work for us and you pay us money and everybody benefits. It's great.
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea. The idea that if you can do something to someone on some level, they would have wanted it that way. If reality can be made such that something is the case, that is that again that merging of can and should, then on some level, the Dwemer would be thinking that this should be this way.
Here's an interesting.
Which I kind of want to check the antecedents of the Dwemer law to see if that's got any reflections on that. Give me a second.
Well, on
Anyway,
the
carry
subject of consent and, like, I guess, gratitude in some ways, so the analysis of Cal's almost done, the translation says, we do not desire thanks, for we do not believe in it. We do not ask for gratitude, for we do not believe in it.
Right.
However, they still have words for it. But I guess that's the dwarves key.
Maybe because they're trying to be altruistic, but they're from an objective or outside standpoint, they're fucking monsters, and they don't realize that what they're doing is fucked up. They have no clue. Oh no! Don't thank me. I'm just doing my job, man. It's cool.
It could be. I mean, I would think it's probably you could probably assume that there were Dwemer out there who were so ensconced in Dwemer culture that they would go out and do what other cultures would consider terrible things and not see any problem with it. But I think there were at least a non-zero number of Dwemer who understood that what they were doing was not considered acceptable by other cultures.
Yeah.
But they probably just didn't give a shit, or or they did care. It's just they felt that this was whatever they were doing was more important,
Yeah, more important because it was kinder or something.
This is the lesser of two evils, or it's necessary. It has to happen. I mean, the Thalmor, a lot of people, including myself, like to forward the idea that the Thalmor are doing what they're doing because they consider it to be the mathematical necessity. It's not that it's the right thing or the wrong thing. It's just the thing you have to do because this is the situation you're in. It's like saying, is it morally reprehensible to take a breath after you've just had one? It's like, well, that's what you do because that's where you're at,
Goddamn existential math nerds ruining existence.
Well, I like the idea of Dwemer as existential math nerds, so that works out well for me,
I always kind of like them that they've got sort of a prankster aspect to them too, but a very mean prankster.
Yeah.
Because let's look at True Flame. True Flame was basically a giant joke, if you think about it. Because when we go to Reforge, as it were, everyone thinks it's this magical blade that eternally is on fire, and Braddock just tells you, we just basically poured boiling pitch on it and set it on fire.
Yeah.
Go get some oil.
Yeah, you need oil.
Anybody go get some oil to look like a badass. Like that.
Don't tell anybody.
Which again it ties in with Chimavidium in a way. If they can get away with duping someone with something in some form of technology, if you then they will.
Mhm.
It kind of feels like it kind of feels like, well, if we can fool these Chimera into thinking that this person wrapped up in armor is a golem, then we will. It's the idea that they have this such a low opinion of everyone else. They'll trick them if it's simpler. It's a shortcut. If they know that whoever they're talking to doesn't understand or can't do something, then they'll screw with you because it's easier.
Azure in the box.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's exactly where my head was going. Yeah, that Dwemer's last thoughts were, "Gotcha, bitch."
Although that's more a validation of the principle. It's someone who has tested a hypothesis and got an interesting result. I'm not necessarily sure that that's trickster. It's just the Dwemer can be tricked.
Yeah.
Therefore, the Dwemer don't know everything.
Therefore, they're not any better than they. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So God's a fair game to screw with as well.
Could I have some more coffee? Here, I have a cup.
Let's see.
Coffee.
Yeah, I do like coffee.
Okay.
You guys hear that?
Yeah, Matthew's been asking about the traditional Dwemer children's rhyme, a type of zero still to be discovered. I think you're particularly interested in that line where the quote comes from Afternoon Arbus. The reports are true. There is a type of zero still to be discovered. All critics agree.
I love that.
I don't know about anybody else, but my first thought is immediately to the world denial of Numidium there. A type of zero still to be discovered is the type of zero where nothing exists. And, you know...
Yeah, it's the null versus false difference.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like how in programming you can have a signed zero and an unsigned zero.
Yeah, exactly. Or, you know, null is both an integer and an abstract value in JavaScript, but then everything is everything in JavaScript. So I hate JavaScript.
Sorry, there's another line that's jumped out at me actually. Afternoon AE, all is well. Afternoon AE, I hope all is well in the world of modern folklore. If AE, that's the type of that's an element of the soul, right? That's AE, animus, etc. AE is identity.
It's existence. Yeah.
Again, it's everyone needs to take another shot because existence and folklore. My mind immediately goes to Jung and archetypes.
Yep. Drink up.
So your existence is determined by and your existence and your nature is determined by folklore, which in a way goes to
Jungian archetypes
as well.
Is it too late to be drunk? I mean, too early in the afternoon to be drunk?
Well, it's 12:24 here. So.
I don't know about you guys. It's 8:30 in the evening for me. So.
Oh hey!
Yeah,
Great timing.
Hey, that's the line alcoholics always say, right? It's 5 p.m. somewhere.
That's right. Yeah. Somewhere out there, somewhere, 5 nerds are talking about Jung.
Yeah.
But yeah, and
struck me as an interesting tie-in there.
Well, and also, I mean, one of the other things that Jung talked about heavily with Jungian archetypes was, when he was talking about archetypes, was the idea of naming something so that it can exist.
Yeah.
And that's part of the sort of the metaphysics behind the word AE as far as Elnifex goes, is that it's both a declaration of existence and a acknowledgement of existence, which is the same thing as a name. So, like, for example, the idea of AE being the part of being the first part of Adra, if you think about the structure of the word, is that it's a positive word. Basically, it's an affirmation. But it's also validating the existence. So AE doesn't just mean Aedra doesn't just mean these are our ancestors. It's saying, it's validating these as our ancestors. It's not just a confirmation; it's a validation. It's both.
Yeah.
So it's a very these are very strong metaphysical concepts to tie to a single word. In the case of the Christian Bible, it's also highly related to the name of God.
Yes.
Which Michael backed me up on this. The God's name literally means I am.
Yeah, Yahweh.
Yeah. So,
or more correctly, I am that which I am.
Yeah. I am that I am. I am what I am. Yeah.
Yeah, I am myself.
Yeah. So the
a lot of yams going on here.
But you can move. You can. I mean, I'm sorry, my head's ticking overtime on this. That is also a metaphysical concept that you can also extend to state that God's name is the declaration of himself that allows himself to exist as the origin point of all existence.
Mm-hmm.
I can accept that.
Yeah. So when people talk about the Godhead as a dreaming, I'm frequently interested that there is no metaphysical point that I've found yet where a god in the Elder Scrolls universe declares itself like by name. Does that make sense?
Yeah. There's no one saying they are the first. I mean, Sothosil kind of comes close in the words in sequence. But that's because he is the creator and originator of the world to come. It's not he's responsible for Nirn ensuing. He's not responsible for Nirn prior.
Right.
So it's the same principle, but
what about the Erdra?
Yeah, that's a fair point.
I don't know. I'll have to think about that one.
I know Vivec refers to herself by titles a lot in the sermon.
True. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I did see something about the Erdra recently, and a relation to it's also the origin point of the Arabis as the maybe. If we go back to the darkness of Oblivion and the source of the Arabis as the maybe, you have to have the is and is not prior to that. Mm-hmm. I can't remember what was said in the actual Reddit thread that I'm desperately trying to think of, and I will post it up in the links for when this thing goes onto YouTube, because I will find it. It's going to bug me otherwise. Yeah. But it's basically the idea that being in that primordial darkness, in the sense of being part of that initial subgradients, that initial maybe, is what's part of the Erdra. It's just that, and because of that uncertainty, that maybe is core to Nocturnal's being. She's an expression of the grey maybe in itself in a way that other things are not. If that makes sense, it's not a claim to primacy; it's a claim to a reflection of the ultimate reality. Sorry, I babbled a lot there.
And I'm kind of looking at it from a almost a linguistic standpoint, because I think as we touched on a minute ago, the AE in Aedra, I mean AE is almost like a determiner. It's like it is. And then for like Daedra, I think that the D counteracts that, and then Dra would be our ancestors. So the Aedra are our ancestors. The Daedra are not our ancestors. So DAE being the opposite of AE.
Sorry, can I get horribly linguistic nerdy for a second? I've just realised a possible derivative in the from the UASP thing on the Dwemer language. The syllable dua is our. You have duan chard of the stones around us. Dua far of our bond. Dua is our. So if we just shift that slightly, Dua to Dra, then we've got our.
Okay.
Dua.
They are ours and they're not ours.
Yeah,
Sure.
Dua
Yeah.
in the Dwemer language is the same as Dra in the Elvish language that we have.
Wouldn't that be Elnifex?
Well, if you want to go back
Uh,
far enough, everything kind of comes from Elnifex except Gel, the language of the Argonians.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I don't think we have an Elnifex element there to say what the final core is. But the link between Dua and Dra seems a bit too similar to be a coincidence here.
Yeah.
It might just.
To finish out my thought here, thinking about the Urdra in that way, meaning like first.
Yeah.
If I'm interpreting that correctly, and then Dra meaning ours or our ancestors, the first ancestor, which I mean, if that's a name that we ascribe, I mean the first darkness, really, because it's nocturnal. I mean, this is where the thread of thought kind of fizzles out, but that's. I mean, if we're talking about the name of God and something that names itself, and I thought for a second about like mimics and protonymics, and we've seen a little bit of that in like Redguard, when we use Mehrunes Dagon's mimic and protonymic. But yeah, that's kind of where my brain went.
Oh, we've really spiraled spectacularly off the topic here.
Yes, we have.
We kind of do that a lot here.
Yeah.
And
the Elder
the
Scrolls
Dwemer
Ramblecast. Yeah.
And the Dwemer do beg for a lot of meta speculation.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they caused a big fuss. So I think we should probably wrap it up. We've already hit an hour and a half.
Yep.
And let's see. Once again, we find ourselves at the unenviable position of not having a subject for the next cast.
Oh,
Well, at some point we gotta rediscuss Sothasil because there's just. So
Oh,
much
that's
new
right, we
stuff
do.
on
You're 100% correct. We have to rediscuss Sothasil. We got to do another cast for Sothasil, which I would love to do. So, Trainwiz, if you're available for that, we can work around your schedule whenever you're available. If you want to be in on
I
that,
am always available for the Brass Daddy.
Okay, yes.
Nice.
For Brass Senpai, yes.
I know we had talked about looking at other non-playable races and their cultures.
That's right.
Yeah.
We've already done all the playable races.
Yeah.
We've got the other unplayables, and we've also got the Daedra as a set of beings.
Oh, that's right.
In terms of talking about the lesser Daedra and
Yes.
stuff, and the politics of Oblivion.
Mhm.
Those are the two races that we have left, and those are the two racial castes that we have left.
Yeah, I
As far
agree.
as I'm concerned,
we
anyway.
actually have a fair bit more Elder Scrolls stuff to cover. There's a lot in these series.
Nah.
Yeah.
Nah.
Even like I don't think we could accurately cover non-playables in a single cast.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But I mean, it's not really a question of is there more to cover. It's always a question of what's next, more than is there going to be a next. Yeah. So I want to thank everybody for showing up. One more, one more last plug for the Forgotten Seasons, available on the Creation Kit soon, or Creation Club soon.
Bye, Mike.
Also, I just want to take this moment. Trainwiz, always been a big fan of your work. Thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure being on here. And I'm forever going to use Brass Daddy. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Copyright 2018, yeah. Okay, so everybody wave goodbye. Those of you who have cameras, bye-bye.
Take care, friends.